Well, when I was in high school, about to turn 16, small town, Northwest Arkansas, there was two things that you felt like you needed to succeed socially. You needed to play on the football team, and you needed to have a car.
So what position did you play?
Well, I was a runner.
Uh-huh.
I did well on the track team, but for some reason I could not succeed at football. And so the position I played on the football team was bench.
It's the South Texas Jazz Project on KRTU 91.7 FM, and tonight we are featuring Paul Farrell. He's my friend right here in San Antonio. He's a violinist, he's a guitarist, he is a former owner of Crazy Cat Music. We're going to be hearing some of Paul Farrell's music, as well as speaking about subjects ranging from cars to music to football to international adventures. It's the South Texas Jazz Project on KRTU with Paul Farrell. First, before we go anywhere, I'd like for you to just introduce yourself. If someone met you for the first time, what would you say about yourself?
Oh, okay. My name is Paul Farrell. I'm a Renaissance man. I'm a jazz violinist and a purveyor of violin Nacht music.
That's great. And you're playing around a bit, though, mostly playing just violin. Tell me about your violin.
My violin?
Yes.
The violin I have doesn't have a label on it anymore. I don't know what happened to it, that he didn't put it in there or it fell out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Probably it could be what they call a conservatory instrument, but it's a real nice French violin that I found at Crazy Cat when I started working there. And very nice looking instrument. It's had the top repaired once or twice. And I just think it sounds great and it looks great.
Yeah, it's a French violin, so is the construction any different on that, or just a French maker? Because I'm a cellist myself, and so I know there's a big difference between, a French bridge and a German bridge and all those sorts of things, different components of the instrument. Do you know so much about that with your instrument?
Well, this particular instrument is a Stradivarius copy, and I really don't know what to say about that instrument, except it looks great and it sounds good. You pick it up and you're glad to be with it.
How did you come upon it?
It was at Crazy Cat when I got there.
Really?
So I took it under my wing.
And your other instruments that you tend to play are guitar and the mandolin. You do play mandolin?
I used to play mandolin back in the late 60s. Well, when I was in junior high, I played clarinet. and in elementary school, I played clarinet. And at the end of the 60s, we're rolling around, and everybody was playing guitar, and I really needed to get on the bandwagon so I could play a few of those Creedence songs. And so I started playing guitar, and I did well playing guitar. But every time I'd look around, or you'd show up for a band meeting or something, try to form a band, there would be like 3 or 4 guitar players that would show up. And so I said, I need to break out. So I said, well, I'll play the mandolin. That looks doable. With these guitar skills, I can transfer them over to the mandolin and have something different. You get a somewhat different sound. So that's what I did. I started playing mandolin. But later on, this friend of mine in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, Perry Dalford, he owned a music store there. He was an old guy, and he saw me playing the mandolin. He said, really ought to play the violin. I shook my head. I'd really admired many violin players. But I thought that mojo was way too strong for me. But he talked me into it, and he gave me this great deal on an old Hopf violin. So,
what year was this?
That would be in 1973, perhaps. And so I said, listen, I'm going to learn one song on this violin, and then that's it. Okay? So a month later, I had learned Bile Them Cabbage Down. And I look back on that month. I said, well, if I quit playing the violin now, then I will be tossing away all those hours I spent learning to play it this month. And I don't like that concept. So I kept playing the violin, and I gave up the mandolin.
Bile Them Cabbage Down.
Bile Them Cabbage Down. At the time, I was playing some bluegrass. Bluegrass music had made kind of a resurgence, in at least where we were, and I think probably nationwide it was kind of being re-examined in the early 70s, and we were playing it.
How did you end up in San Antonio?
It was I married somebody that was coming to San Antonio. Even the marriage didn't last, but I stayed here. Actually, I tried to bail out and go back to Arkansas at one time because I just ran out of what I considered to be viable possibilities. And I thought, well, I'll go back to Arkansas and see what's like there. And so I drove there. Actually, my second Volkswagen convertible. I've had 3 Volkswagen convertibles, a 63, a 71, and a 74. Well, I drove back up there in my 71, and it was during the beginning of winter. Well, that winter, at one point at the end of January, my car turned into an iceberg. And it very cold. And the pipes froze in my apartment. The car turned into an iceberg, and it stayed an iceberg until the end of March. A yellow, kind of a dirty yellow iceberg. And I said, this is not right. And I couldn't stand it. I was miserable and cold. After being in San Antonio, I think people in San Antonio, even they may not realize it, they become acclimatized. And if you go back up north where it's cold, it hurts you a lot more. And you look at those people milling about up there, and I was thinking, why do you people stay here? Don't you know the weather's much nicer south of here? So I wanted to leave, and I came back. I'm glad I did because I have a lot of fun in San Antonio.
sounds of Paul Farrel. And we're sitting down here with Paul Farrell today on the South Texas Jazz Project. You're from Arkansas.
Well, I was born in Texas, just for the record. My father came from a little town called Aspermont, south of Fort Worth. But we did migrate to northwest Arkansas, and where I became, among other things, a Razorback fan and a violin player. Grew up on a farm out there in northwest Arkansas. It was actually a nice place, and I have fondest memories of being with my grandfather. And later on, went to the University of Arkansas. That's where I met a lot of musicians, saw a lot of music performed. Just like I said, we were playing kind of bluegrass music. And then we started taking a look at jazz. You know how college students are, you're kind of exploring and trying to learn new things, and you're excited by new things. And of course, we were excited as musicians. Well, I didn't tell you this, but at that time when I was going to University of Arkansas back in 1973, Bill Evans came to the University of Arkansas, played an outdoor concert in this place called the Greek Theater, which is still there. And he came with his trio, Eddie Gomez on bass. Of course, Bill Evans, always one thing you notice quickly about Bill Evans, especially from that time, was all the bass solos.
Oh, yeah.
And we were thrilled. A friend of mine had some of his records, and so we started listening to those records, and Bill Evans just blows you away when you hear him, because he's so erudite and glib and just goes on, and he's like he's a consummate jazz musician. He's one of those consummate jazz musicians.
And your degree was what? What was your degree in?
I was one of those English majors.
English major. What did you ended up? Did you do anything with that? No. But I'm glad I got an English degree. It made me very conscious of the language. I'm very picky when I write. That it be well-formed prose. Yeah. And that the words are spelled correctly, and that it's concise, and it moves through the topic and stays focused. And I'm a big fan of well-crafted prose. Let's just say that. Well, did that lead into a little bit of a stand-up comedy career? Did you?
Oh, my stand-up comedy career. Yes, my stand-up days.
In the 80s is this?
Oh, in the 80s. Yeah, that was in the 80s. I guess that would be back the mid to late 80s.
I can tell by the haircut in the photo.
Yeah. That wasn't a mullet, was it? I don't know. It wasn't a mullet. It was more like a shag, I think.
It was, Bella Fleck-esque.
Okay, that's good. I can go with that. But that was something. I did play. I played guitar and sang during that. And it's something that my stand-up act was, I would do it in nightclubs, and so it would have to last about, I'd have to stand up and do like an hour and a half.
What?
So there was a lot of things I did. I had a box full of props, that stuff I would pull out, like fake hand grenades and caps that had things printed on them, various other things, audience participation. Every now and then I'd sing a song. I might do a parody of some song, and I would have some regulars in the audience that would come to my shows that helped me out tremendously. But I had to give up my stand-up career because it got to be too much of an alcohol-fueled activity, and I was just uncomfortable with that. So,
where was it at?
I was in Fayetteville, Arkansas, in the Deluxe Rathskeller, and then at the Mountain Inn. It was I was fairly successful, and as a college town, I had a predominantly college audience, and it was fairly successful. But like I say, I just had, had to, due to the fact that it was so alcohol driven, I had to get out of it.
Can I hear? Do you know any of your old bits? Can I hear something?
So it might not be. You would probably have to edit it out. It was laced with a certain amount of blue humor because it's. At the time, and I'd just gotten into it, and it was easy to get a laugh and to keep audiences entertained with blue humor. It's much harder with straight stuff.
South Texas Jazz Project on KRTU 91.7 FM. We're sitting down with Paul Farrel and listening to his violin. We've heard about his violin already. We've heard about his stand-up comedy career as well. Sometimes it's nice to talk about cars, old cars, classic cars. You drive a Mercedes. I've seen your Mercedes, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Is that a diesel or no?
It is a diesel. It's a 1979 a 300 SD. It was the flagship Mercedes of that era, and at the time it was made, it was one of the most wonderful luxury cars that the world could offer.
Mm-hmm.
By today's standards, it doesn't have many bells and whistles, but I can tell you that car is still a very comfortable car, and you can take it coast to coast, and it's just about as comfortable as anything that you can buy new today, and it's more comfortable than a lot of them, actually, because the seats are bigger. It's just a soft, wonderful ride, and it's quiet in there. And
how many miles on that thing?
how many miles? 200,000 miles on that. Over 200,000 miles.
I thought it would be more, honestly. And it's such an old car, and those diesels will run forever.
It's going to run. It's going to take me through my lifetime, I think, unless well, I won't say that. It's going to last a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased with that car. I've been driving that era of Mercedes. That was the golden era of Mercedes-Benz. Was the 60s into about 1975. After that, the modernization, all the bells and whistles, and the new designs, and the accommodations they had to make for pollution controls. It made the engines they're a lot less friendly, and they're a lot harder to repair for somebody, an owner. That car I have, the '79, there's a whole lot of things I can do to it myself, and I do. But I also have a 1974 Volkswagen Beetle convertible.
Wow.
Now if you want a car that does not have any bells and whistles, then a 60s and 70s era Beetle is the car for you.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, not spacious though. On the other end.
No, that would be somewhat challenging to drive to LA in a Volkswagen Beetle. But in the winter would probably be a better time to do it.
Yeah. Oh, great. When did you start getting into cars? Was it as a child?
Well, when I was in high school, about to turn 16, small town, Northwest Arkansas, there was two things that you felt like you needed to succeed socially. You needed to play on the football team, and you needed to have a car.
So what position did you play?
Well, I was a runner. I did well on the track team, but for some reason I could not succeed at football. And so the position I played on the football team was bench. But I believe I did accomplish my social goal.
Yeah, what was your car, though? Because that's really what matters.
My first car was a '63 Volkswagen convertible. So I started out with a Volkswagen, and now I'm back in one. And I like that. But yeah, at the time, well, I love that car. I bought that car. It was like, I bought it in 1965. It was 1963. It was like new. I just drove it, and I just learned to love it. And even though it wasn't a big muscle car, a lot of my friends, as time passed, 1965, well, Mustangs came out, Camaros, then they moved on into like Chevelles, big muscle cars, the big Mopars from that era, the Challenger and the Charger, all those cars, the great muscle cars. But I really never had a muscle car.
You stuck to your bug.
Well, later I got a Mustang, a 65 Mustang.
Wow.
But they weren't really muscle cars. They were more style oriented. Mustangs, especially the first ones. They weren't great performance cars. Some of them had V8s, and they moved into that, of course. But originally it was a stylistic thing.
KRTU 91.7 FM. It's the South Texas Jazz Project. We're sitting down with Paul Farrel, violinist, car enthusiast, former stand-up comedian, world traveler.
Well, I'm not, I used to say I wasn't a world traveler, but I have been to some places in Europe, Berlin a couple times, Paris, etc., Amsterdam. Amsterdam, I could use that in my stand-up routine. Amsterdam experience they're like custom made for stand-up routines.
Really? Tell me something about your trip to Amsterdam.
You'd probably have to edit it.
Well, that's fine. I'll edit it.
Amsterdam is this crazy town. You get off at the train station, and a half a block from the train station is the girls in the windows. And if you want, if you want coffee, you go to a cafe, and if you want reefers, you go to a coffee house. And sure enough, you go in there and you want marijuana. They bring you this reefer in this little, like a test tube thing.
Talking more about, this kind of international thing, let's take it to music now.
Yeah.
So the music that you're playing has gypsy origins and French origins, right?
Music, yes, you could, well, when you play that, anything that sounds like Hot Club, you get that. This is kind of gypsy jazz. And
but at the same time, yours is a little, maybe even a little southern. You definitely hear some of the bluegrass connection there, I would say, in your playing. Just the way that you play the violin, it doesn't sound the same as when Stefan Grappelli is playing it.
Oh, no. Well, the more I listen to Grappelli, it's not like I sit around listening to Grappelli, all the time, but if I do start to listen to him, I start to sound more like him. But yes, sometimes when I'm playing a jazz number, if it's in the right key, then I will take a double stop break, which is kind of a bluegrass thing.
Right.
Like, especially if it's in like D or G or A or E maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the keys where you can do that fiddly sounding thing where you have a drone string, and you play those characteristic country bluegrass sounding double stops.
Well, I think even in the tone, though, Grappelli's, even though people will call it gypsy jazz, it is a refined sound how he plays the violin, and I think that when I listen to you, it's good to hear the rosin, and it's good to hear the strings, the hairs on the string. And I think that's, has a lot to do with the bluegrass tone coming into the music as well.
I think that's probably true, yes, because I did grow up listening to the more heavy-handed players. And it's actually something I try to back off on that sometimes because, when you learn the violin, one of the greatest teachers said he could teach a donkey to play violin with the left hand. It's the right hand that's the hard part. And so I thought about that. Leopold Auer, I think, is who said that, and he was one of the great violin teachers of all time. And now nobody knows who he was, but you can still find his books. So Leopold Auer, and he said that, and so I got to thinking about that, and so I started to pay a lot more attention to my right hand, and I still do. And Stefan Grappelli, he's got that really light, airy tone and you hear that a lot more in classical players. His technique is very good, and he's also his right hand his left hand is very fast, and so he plays those slurred runs that are characteristic of his style. But also his airy tone. I do admire it, but there's other more heavy-handed players like Joe Venuti, Snuff Smith, that play more like I do, or I play more like they do. But also people like Vassar Clements, who is a famous bluegrass player. It was one who I saw when I was first starting to play, and I did try to emulate him somewhat. He's probably the greatest. Vassar Clements is probably the greatest bluegrass player I've ever heard. Whereas Stefan Grappelli is probably the greatest violin player, or the greatest jazz violin player I've ever heard. Jascha Heifetz is probably the greatest classical violin player I've ever heard. So those three guys pretty much cover it all.
There you go. Yeah.
So there ought to be a joke. Say Jascha Heifetz, Stephen Capelli and Pastor Clemens walk into a bar.
KRTU 91.7 FM. We've been sitting down here with Paul Farrel. He's a violinist and Renaissance man here in San Antonio. What's next for Paul Farrel musically? You said you're looking for places to open up a new shop.
I am. It's just got to be the right place. It's got to be the right price. It's got to be the right real estate.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be a music store. The small music stores, you can't really make a whole lot of money. Your overhead has to be real low because you're not going to make a lot of money selling strings and picks and new guitars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You'll probably make more trading instruments, buying and selling instruments, because there's always somebody's going to walk in want to sell a really nice instrument.
Yeah.
They might not be a musician. This belonged to my dad. I want to sell it. This belonged to my grandfather. I want to sell it. Somebody gave me this as a present or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they bought it at a flea market. Now they want to sell it. So you can make some money selling that, but generally it's very hard to make a profit, in a small music store.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to keep your overhead as close to nothing as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm looking on the east side to buy a nice piece of property. I would rent. I'm not finding anything over there right now. The real estate over there got real hot. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a place over there. I'm still looking. My past experiences have told me that it will happen
Mm-hmm.
because the market keeps expanding. Things keep coming on the market. It keeps churning and turning over and everything.
I think so.
I'm looking for that. And I've got this great concept for a music store I know it's going to, if I could just find the right spot, I want to call it, this is good, Guitar Bar. And what we're going to do is we're going to sell guitars and beer. Because see, in a retail establishment, your goal has to be, when anybody comes in the door, that's selling something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, I can't sell everybody that comes in the door a guitar, because a lot of people come in, they just want to look.
Right.
Or they want some strings or some picks or something.
Mm-hmm.
And some people won't even buy picks and strings. But just about everybody, the smallest amount of pressure to buy a beer, right? Or even a soft drink.
Uh-huh. And then you got them hanging around a little bit.
And then you got them hanging around a little bit. And I think it's like a concept made in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm looking to do. It's the concept called Guitar Bar. And we'll sell guitars and beer. And
that's brilliant. I think it's
guys
really
are going to flock to this. This is going to be big.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I do want to direct people to, your website, at least. The Bonvivants.
TheBonvivants.com. Yes, come visit me there.
On Facebook, obviously.
Please visit on Facebook. This is Paul Farrel on Facebook. I would love to have you for a friend. Anybody?
And then look for you at Caparelli's every Friday night, right?
And come to see us at Caparelli's. I think we'll be working other places about town, so we'll keep you posted about that. But yes, Caparelli's has been there 4.5 years. Come by 6:30 to 9:30 to see us. Come by, have some excellent Italian food.
That's Caparelli's on Main. We should delineate that.
That is a distinction. There's no other Caparelli's in town that's like that one. This one is owned by a Caparelli, a very charming person who I love a lot. And thank you, Gay Caparelli, for having us there for 4.5 years. It's great. I like to have sit-down jobs. As a musician, I like them because I know when Friday rolls around, I know where I'll be.
Yeah.
And I know what I'll be doing.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking to me about a wide range of things we've covered today. And it's great to know you more, and I think people will enjoy hearing about you more as well. As I'm sure tons of people have just seen you jogging around with Pepper, and I think, who is that guy?
Well, that's it. When you see the guy jogging down the street with a small furry dog in the Brackenridge Park area, that's probably me.
This has been the South Texas Jazz Project on KRTU 91.7 FM every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. and Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Special thanks today to Donnie Meals with Edit Point Studios and production assistant Raphael Lewis. My name's Emilio. I'm your host, and we'll see you next time on the South Texas Jazz Project.